Hi everyone, and welcome to LogisticsSales.com. You may be wondering who we are. We've been in the supply chain and logistics industry for several years, and we put together a free sales platform for young and veteran salespeople alike, and give them quality sales information on how to pursue their journey in sales. And at the same time, we partner them with businesses who are looking for quality salespeople to help with their business. We were going to do a hard launch at the end of spring, early summer, but because of the potential tariff charges that may be coming here in North America between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, we thought we'd launch a little bit earlier and just offer some advice, some help if we can, and maybe talk to individuals and companies alike on what to expect and maybe what to consider moving forward. My name is Dean. I'm your host, and with me, as always, are my co-hosts, Damon.
Hello.
And Gail.
Hi guys, happy to be here.
And really, our goal is to help provide everyone who's listening, whether it's salespeople, companies, basic real-world solutions that might help them adjust their way of doing business and may have to do business if these tariffs do come into place. So we're going to, dive into a few options, a few issues that may come up, and hopefully offer a few solutions too. So let's get started.
Definitely, Dean. I think with our background in logistics, we want to try to offer a couple solutions and maybe look at the opportunities that we could get out of a situation where we are kind of being bullied and people on both sides of the border are being affected, and not even, Canada, United States, but also other lovely countries like Mexico, China, possibly Europe. But who knows who's going to be affected by these tariffs. And if we could figure out different strategies and maybe share amongst each other different strategies of how we can make this work and be able to step up for each other, right? And say, what do we have available to us? How do we navigate and find new customers at a time where our old customers, it may not be feasible to work with anymore? And so what we want to do is kind of share a couple of these strategies with you based on our background and what we see on a day-to-day basis. And there's 5 points that I have here. The first one being how to set up a supply chain. If you don't already have supply chain globally, how do you do it with a minimal cost to your business? Secondly, bonded shipments. So not many people have maybe heard of this term. And definitely, if you don't understand any of the terminology, do reach out to us in the comment section. We'll try to get back to you as much as we can. And if you have a question, someone else probably does too. But bonded shipments, in short, is a way to travel through the US with your goods without having to pay the tariffs. And we want to share that information and to figure that out and be able to use that US infrastructure without having to worry about penalties and tariffs coming your way. So number 3 is just simple global sourcing, a couple techniques on how to think outside the box. Because when we get tied up with neighbors and we have been working with for years and years, we tend to get complacent. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, is the saying, is how it usually goes. But when we get into partnerships, like I know on our side, we have long-standing partnerships, 15 years, 20 years with some of our clients. Do we ever think about changing that? No. It's one of those situations where, whatever happens in that relationship, we take some of that hit, the customer takes some of that hit. We kind of always figure out a way to work together. But then when you have, something out of the blue like this, 25% is a lot of money, right? 25% increase in any situation is a lot. So we want to show you, again, a few tips on how to look outside the box for new clientele if it comes down to it. Number 4 is how to leverage your local resources. What's available to you right now, whether it's online or through government. We're going to touch on a few points on that. And finally, we're going to talk about the people that we have here in our country, or even if you're watching this abroad, who can you help in this moment if your country is being, let's say, bullied or being threatened with tariffs, and you think people may lose their jobs. But there's a lot of smart people in the world, and we want to show you how to leverage that talent, whether it's locally, where you are, or even abroad, globally. So we'll give you a few tips on how we find talent and hopefully it'll help you as well.
And I think it's important to note too that these policies, if they're put into place, they're going to impact the strategies of a lot of individuals and companies on how they do business. And in our original and our regular episodes on our platform, we discuss a lot, about relationships more than transactional. Sales is kind of the goal, and really coming from a place of service. And I think the same thing can apply here. I mean, we want to look at trying to help address a potential problem and what is the best way to go about it. And it's going to entail building strong relationships and looking to really diversify the markets you're working with if push comes to shove. So Gail, looks like you got something on your mind.
Yes, Dean. I just wanted to come on here and say that the whole premise of this video that we're giving you guys today is just to hopefully give those who maybe aren't sure of how to restructure their supply chain the tools and some strategies and just a little bit of expertise on different ways that they can make those adjustments, because we do get a 30-day extension as of today for the Trump tariffs. And if they can make proactive decisions and make proactive relationships, hopefully the ideal goal is to prevent these companies from taking huge financial hits and burdens when the tariffs do come into play, if they do, and that they've already restructured and realigned their supply chains in order to continue moving and to continue operating.
So we've mentioned real world solutions, and I think one of the first ones is supply chain and production adjustments. What do you say to that, Dean?
What I say is, if you don't have operations set up in the US or in both countries, what you want to do is look at third-party warehousing. Again, based on how your situation is set up for your company, are you sourcing goods from outside somewhere? And is it coming into your country first, or is it going directly into the US? So if it's coming directly into your country and now you're going to be affected by tariffs, you may want to look at partnering with third-party warehouses for distribution, even maybe assembling, production, manufacturing, but there's different avenues you want to look at for that. But what we recommend is, right now you're not going to be able to have the affordability to build a new place. So partnering with third-party warehousing and logistic companies is an ideal solution to handle that. And a lot of them handle fulfillment. We see this with a lot of online sales. We see this with Amazon building warehouses in different countries just for that purpose.
And I think it really comes down to, are you able to dig through your supply chain and figure out what's the process? If you're manufacturing soups, but you're getting your ingredients from this country and this country and this country, what is the process for getting in the materials or the raw materials that you need in order to manufacture your product? By going through and analyzing how those products get routed into your facility for the manufacturing process, then you can start to see which areas may be affected by the potential 25% increase in tariffs.
And we see that with some of our peanut butter manufacturers here in Canada, where they're bringing the peanuts from places like Texas back into Canada and producing that peanut butter and sending it back into the US. Now, if operations are hit and now you're hit with tariffs coming up here into Canada and going back down, now you may want to take a look and say, well, hey, that's 50% on either side. Or in a situation like that, do you want to just have it, third-party processed? Look at third-party processors in the States that can do that for you without you having to take the entire burden of bringing that entire shipment back into Canada and subject to double tariffs.
Which is going to lead us into the second one that we talked about, which is doing bonded shipments. And this one, it does get a bit technical, but hopefully I can get this fairly simple for most of our viewers here today, so it's easy for you to understand. But the gist of what a bond is to move your cargo through a country without having to pay your duties or taxes. It's a surety bond that assures, in this case, U.S. Customs, that product will never land and reach U.S. markets. So when you have applied for a bond, you basically have the ability to move your cargo from port to port through the transport country, in this case, the United States of America, without having to pay duties and taxes into that country. So if you're a produce company and for example, you buy avocados from an American supplier and they're sourcing those avocados from Mexico, maybe the move here is to create that relationship with the Mexico supplier, and instead of dealing with the middleman in the United States, deal with the shipments moving in bond from the US border and then bringing it all the way into the Vancouver Port of Crossing or the Ontario Port of Crossing or whatever it is, moving that cargo through the United States, but without having to use the US third party.
And we see this a lot of times, Gail. Bonded shipments were typically used for high value goods that were brought into the US ports and came in bonded to Canada, thus avoiding tariffs in the US and actually even avoiding tariffs in Canada until the product was actually used. And then what they would do in Canada is take the products outside of the bonded portion, which is usually just like a yellow tape, right? It's just more of a formality to say bonded, but there's some regulations for that. But pretty much it's yellow tape that's in a warehouse that you take the goods out of, and now you're paying tariffs or taxes for the portion that you're using. And we would see it with high-end valued products like electronics or medical equipment, but then we would also see it with produce shipments, typically coming from Mexico. And any of those shipments coming back into Canada would also come in bond in transit through the United States, but they would go to either a bonded warehouse within the US, and then we would pick it up as a Canadian company back into Canada. But that whole portion of US transportation would not be subject to tariffs or any duties and taxes.
Exactly. And there are a few different types of bonds as well. And my recommendation for you guys, if you want to learn more about the specific types, is contact your customs broker, because they're going to be the experts. They're going to be the ones that are going to help you issue those bonds if you move forward with that. So they'll be able to explain it and break it down, all the different types. But the process is basically just being able to move your cargo without having to pay duties and taxes. It keeps the U.S. hands off of that freight while it's transporting through there. The nice part is that because the infrastructure is already set up for bonded warehousing, there are bonded warehouses all across Canada, the United States, and Mexico. At every major port, you're going to have warehousing options and opportunities there. Even some inland bonded warehousing options are available. There's a few websites. I'll see if I can pull up a slide here with some of the key ports. So you'll see here there are 5 major ports in Mexico. These are what you're going to do if you're going to be moving goods direct from Mexico into Canada. These are some of the major ports that you're going to have to find bonded warehousing for and then coordinate your moves from. So the 5 major ones are Laredo, Texas, El Paso, Texas, Brownsville, Texas, Nogales, Arizona, and Mexicali and Tijuana, California border. I'm going to leave it on the US side so you guys can Google search if you want the Mexico port names. But those are going to be your major ports that you're going to transport those goods for bonded entries from. In this next slide, you'll actually be able to see some of the US major ports for ocean container freight that's coming in. So this is another opportunity where you get the ability to move your freight in bond from the ports directly. So a lot of times it does happen where companies in Canada, in Mexico, they source their products in through the United States for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's cost, sometimes it's capacity, etc. But they bring them into the United States and then have them shipped either via rail or over the road from the US ocean ports to the receiver in whether side of the border you're going. But in those situations, you can also do the same thing by creating a bond. You get to move that freight through the United States from the port when it lands all the way through to that port of exit and not have to pay your duties or taxes to the US government.
And typically we see a lot of this when larger vessels are only going to, let's say, a larger port like Long Beach, or maybe some of the South American companies that you may be working with are only shipping into Miami or Houston ports. And so instead of having that entire vessel come up into Canada for you to get your goods, you can actually have them offloaded in any of the US ports and bring them in bond again into Canada via road, because a lot of the traffic in North America is moved by road or rail, but you can have it move in bond to Canada without having to pay those duties and taxes. And same with if you're in the US, like we do a lot of freight from our port here in Vancouver. And a lot of the stuff that comes into the Vancouver port is for the auto industry in Michigan, Ohio. And same thing, when it comes into Vancouver, we take it in bond from the port to the warehouse, from the warehouse to the Canadian border, and then we clear it through the US into the United States. And so again, avoiding any tariffs and taxes for US customers in Canada.
Exactly. So it gives us the ability to basically create bonds either in the direction of moving out of Canada or into. So it gives that option, whether you're a US importer or a Canadian importer or even a Mexican importer, you do have the ability to look into using bonds to transport your goods.
And if we have confused you, feel free to leave some comments below. I know some of the stuff can go over your head, or maybe some of the examples are hard to digest sometimes, but we're definitely open to working with you and helping you navigate through any of those challenges that you may be facing.
Yeah, and really our goal is just to help find practical solutions to keep your supply chain moving smoothly and really managing your costs effectively. And we've touched on this a bunch, and a lot of it really just surrounds the shipping and logistics optimization. You really want to find key strategies, and one major strategy is to look beyond the United States for sourcing your goods. Tariffs are going to increase the cost if they come into effect, and it's important to explore alternatives in suppliers in other regions. You might want to find a supplier that has a more favorable trade agreement and lower manufacturing costs, which will be beneficial to not just you as a business, but also your customers. Another approach that we've also touched on, of course, is reevaluating your logistics routes. And if we're able to divert some of the vessels, if some of these shipments you're able to get them on vessels coming into Canada, that's another advantage or strategy to look at to not be expose yourself to the unnecessary tariffs. And if that's an option made available to you, it's really forcing, you as a business or an individual as a salesperson to maybe get out of the comfort zone and have to all of a sudden reach out beyond who you're normally dealing with and really build new relationships, and whether it's overseas or into Mexico. We have a great partnership with a carrier in Mexico, and we're able to communicate with them on a daily basis. And it's really having that ability, and with today's technology, it's only a finger's touch away.
Technology is great. I mean, Dean, I WhatsApp with my Mexican partners all the time. And it's so convenient. And with technology nowadays, everything's available on this device that we have. Whether it's, and the communication nowadays, people understand, like, everyone's sourcing globally. The bigger corporations are all doing it globally. They understand the supply chains really well. And that's what we're trying to share with you, is that, don't be afraid to go out and start sourcing. Even right now, when we see what's happening with Mexico, maybe we could pull up this next slide that we have here, but it shows, this is a slide from 2019 though. And what it shows is like over 20,000 shipments were coming into, the US per day, whether that was truck or rail. But same thing with Canada. We were slightly higher at about 23,000 shipments per day of whether it's truck freight or rail freight that was going into the US. But when we have close to 50,000 or 45,000 shipments going back and forth to the US that are now going to be tariffed on a daily basis, we may want to look right at Mexico and say, hey, you know what? Maybe we just bypass the states and start working together, because hey, if we could save ourselves a few dollars, and nobody wants to have to pay double the tariffs if it's going into the United States and then coming back out, we may want to look and say, hey, maybe we streamline this, and maybe thanks to Trump, all these countries now that are going to be potentially tariffed can work together to build better supply chains and have better resources. Yeah.
And you say resources, and our listeners, if you're listening, if you're wondering, well, where do I go if I want to branch out and find another supplier, there's so many different resources out there to look and see. And there's the Blue Book, which has been servicing the produce industry for over 100 years, which has tons of resources in there. And really, for as far as an import database, the Canadian import database is key. I believe we're going to have a few links on here too, made available to the viewers, where you can go in, and based on whichever type of business you're involved in, you might be able to find some points of contact, or at least get the ball rolling to find out, where do I go from here? And we're really lucky that we've got this 30-day grace period. And it's unfortunate it's taken this, but if this is the catalyst to get you out there to deal and broaden your relationships with companies outside of our neighbor down south, and explore European and Asian partners and into Mexico, better late than never.
Exactly. And I think you'll find that a lot of the major corporations, they're already doing a lot of international sourcing, because it honestly, once you set up the infrastructure, it works better. You'll find cheaper product costs, cheaper manufacturing costs, supplier costs. Even sometimes the shipping, when it's coming overseas, can be cheaper than moving it. over rail or truckload or whatever it is, depending on the type of product you're moving and the type of service that it requires. So it's really just opening those doors for some of the smaller to medium-sized businesses who have maybe never looked at the opportunities outside the United States.
You're definitely right about finding different alternatives and helping people reduce their costs in a time where they're worried about additional costs. And let's get into how do we do that? How do we go about global sourcing? And Dean, you touched on this a little bit, that there's so many online trade directories, there's so many online association groups that will, whatever category or industry you're in, you're going to be able to find it if you just do the search. Another one that I want to kind of let people know about, and I've spoken to a few people that didn't know that this thing existed, but like all the import data that for any shipping that's coming into the United States or sometimes even into Canada, it's all tracked. And there's bills of ladings that are available on sites like this one right here in this next slide, which is Import Yeti. And there's many slides, like many online directories like this, like Import Genius or Panjiva, but there's so many that I've looked at in the past, and they all kind of give you the same information. But if you look over here, like it tells us who the suppliers are. And we did a search for a quick produce company, and this is what it showed. Suppliers from South America that has citrus fruits like lemons, and fruit like mandarins and mangoes from Peru. And so it gives you the whole supplier information, and it allows you to be able to contact those people very easily. And how do we contact companies when we don't see them in our network? We go onto LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn is now global, and it has resources in every country as well. And we've done so many searches for different companies, and they give you the network that's within your country, but it also gives you the network within other countries. If you modify your search, you're gonna be able to find the people in Mexico, the people in Peru, the people in South America. And something that we also do to find our talent sometimes is just to put out ads. You'd be surprised as to putting an ad on any job board or even on LinkedIn or some of these other sites that are available to us. But we do get a lot of international responses when we do put out our ads. And depending on how you word your ad, there's a lot of people that want to work with companies that are based in Canada, based in the US, based around the world. But there's people that do want to make that shift. And there's people that are willing to maybe show you their worth from where they're actually at. But on top of that, you can also find people that are experts in what you're looking for, whether they're buyers, whether they're in quality control, also if they're consultants of any sort. But there's so many options to be able to find the talent that you need and to be able to find the companies and resources that you need globally to make it happen. And we're just going back to like the Import Yeti, it also gives you like the forwarding company. So if you look closely at some of the bills of ladings, it's going to tell you the shipping line that was on. It's going to tell you the forwarding agent, and we're going to give you a list of all these agents as well, or links to all the where you can find forwarding agents. And it gives you all that information. You don't have to worry about the logistics. You don't have to worry about how it's going to get to you. You don't have to worry about so many things that, again, the information is readily available. And if major corporations are already using those companies, just understand that each of those companies are also going to have competitors. So hiring a consultant in that area can help you find other competitors that may be doing something very similar, and can diversify your supply chain.
That's great, Damon. Thank you. And we've talked about a Canadian company and networking and building relationships with companies potentially overseas in Europe, Asia, and Mexico. But what about advice for U.S. companies? Yep.
Now, we don't want to just talk to our Canadian and Mexico viewers. We also want to talk to some of our viewers in the United States, because we know that this is going to affect businesses all across North America and globally across the world. We know that with the implementation of the 25% tariffs that Trump is imposing, potentially, that there are going to be response tariffs that are going to be applied by the Canadian government, by the Mexico government, and governments across the world. And it is going to cause a sting to the U.S. economy, both for their imports and for their exports now. So we do have some advice for the U.S. companies. A lot of it is very similar to what we've given in the episode so far, but one of the first things that you can do is also utilizing those bonded movements. So if you are bringing, for example, we see a lot of auto parts come into the Port of Vancouver. They come into the Port of Vancouver, they get moved in bond from Vancouver to the border crossing and then get transported through the United States. That way, the auto manufacturers don't have to pay their duties and taxes into Canada until those products land at the US border, and then they can pay. They're finished, it enters the country, and then the goods now officially belong to them. The other thing that you could do as well is a FTZ zones, foreign trade zones. Again, this is very similar to what we talked about with the bonded warehousing. There are areas within the United States where they can basically land their product, land the cargo, and it will stay secured and unpaid for duties and taxes until such time as they require the product, in which case they can go in, take some of the product, whatever amount that they need for manufacturing, for production, whatever it is, and then use that, paying the taxes on an as-needed basis, which is going to limit that immediate upfront cost. When you have an entire container come in and you have to pay import taxes, that can be a lot. But if you're moving it, say, pallet by pallet out of the warehouse at the time as you need the product, it can help with leveraging the amount of duties and taxes over a longer period of time that you have to pay. This also might be a really good opportunity for U.S. organizations to make partnerships with companies outside of the United States to continue to grow their transportation and their trade and their markets. You may find that there are going to be situations where your customers outside of the USA are going to not want to pay additional amounts for the products that you're going to be manufacturing for them, because you can't sell them to them at the same price you were originally. You now have 25% taxes additional on top of that are going to have to, like, someone has to pay them, and most people at the end of the day, it's going to be the consumer who's paying for it. So if that falls down to the businesses outside of the US, we need to try and find the recouped losses somewhere. So working with Canadian suppliers or Mexico suppliers or European suppliers and sourcing the products directly from those third parties to your third party customers outside of the US will basically just circumvent that need for the products to ever come into the country. You don't have to pay your duties and taxes on it. It saves the tariff, and your customer's happy and you're happy.
And the example we have there is, Washington State is known for selling apples, and a lot of those apples go into Mexico. But right above Washington State is Canada. So now if your apples are subject to a 25% tariff, the next best thing would be, well, hey, can I source these from Canada? It's only 150 miles away. So, if I can get apples from Canada, which again, the Canadian dollar is a lot cheaper than the US dollar, maybe I can sell apples even cheaper to the people in Mexico. You can still be doing the same type of business, but just now you have a different supplier, and use those apples that you're doing in Washington to keep them within maybe the United States. And instead, the apples that were being imported from Canada now go straight into Mexico versus trying to sell, the Washington apples into a country where you're going to be subject to those tariffs. But, great way to kind of still leverage your sales skills to be able to use your network and still maintain your businesses and create jobs. How many of those partnerships can you build if you're working with both sides of the border? You're in the middle. Leverage both countries, figure out new trade relationships, be the bridge.
Yeah, and as we sit here and talk, I'm listening at the same time as we're speaking, and I think that I hope the message that's coming across really is we won't be able to operate status quo if these tariffs come into play. So the companies or individuals out there that just want to do business as usual and continue to trade with their partner across the border, it's going to cost a lot more money. And we're just trying to offer a few suggestions and give people the thought of maybe trying something different, because again, change is the hard, for most people. But really, failure to prepare is preparing to fail. So you want to get out there and start questioning what options do I have? What's out? What else is out there? And we're all resilient. We're a resilient bunch of people, and we've had this in one example from during the pandemic. Here in Canada alone, there was over 2 million people that started businesses surrounding PPE. According to the Globe and Mail, and it just goes to show that, are you able to move with the punches? Are you can you shift markets if needed, or are you able to at least think outside the box? Because 30 days from yesterday, or from today, sorry, we're either going to have to, or we're going to be paying that 25%.
And what I think you're talking about, Dean, is the pivot. How do we pivot our business to make sure that we survive and we thrive through a situation where we seem like we may be going the other way? But again, when you talk about those 2 million companies in Canada that got started during COVID, it wasn't only for PPE, it was for various numbers of industries. The ones that did it for PPE, definitely exponential sales, made a lot of millionaires instantly, but people were changing their distilleries to make sanitizers. People were using their engineering skills to make face shields and face masks. Anyone that was doing fabrics took their, there was a company that was doing hosiery and started making the masks for people to wear. And leveraging your skills and saying, okay, where else can I diversify? How can I think outside the box? There were so many fitness companies that started coming online because you couldn't go to the gym. But there's so many different companies that came out of it that it just create a whole different industry.
So basically, we don't know what's going to come next. It'll be interesting to see what's going to happen, not just 30 days from now, but 60 days from now, or 6 years from now. We could see the transformation of how far we've come since 2020, 2021, throughout the pandemic, with a lot of changes. And this tariff coming into play may make not just changes temporarily, but it could change things drastically down the line for how we all do business.
Definitely. And if you're still kind of stuck for resources, there's consulting companies that can help you with this as well, and that could facilitate trade in your industry. And when we look at, here's 2 links that we're going to try to share with you for working with Mexico. And there's actually consulting companies based out of Canada that can actually help you with that, as well as having affiliations in the US and also in Mexico. But these companies can assist you in networking with many different industries, such as like agribusiness, manufacturing, education, mining, and even energy. And there's so many different industries that you could potentially tap into that maybe you haven't looked at before, but can be a brand new opportunity for you to expand your business.
Exactly. And you'll also find that we have included a couple resources for anyone who needs them on our website. We have a resource library with some documentation, as well as several of the major links that we utilize for example, like custom brokerage lists, freight forwarder listings, Import Yeti we've included on there so that you can search and look for suppliers, etc. So go take a look at that. You'll find, again, documentation, for example, a list of the US ports, the Canadian ports, Mexico ports, vessel ports, broker lists, etc. There's going to be a whole plethora of resources that are going to help you navigate this and to start putting things into motion for the next 30 days if they do decide to move forward with the tariffs.
Yep. And Damon, I think you have a few options too on how to engage with governments and trade bodies.
Yes, Dean. Government has been very vocal about helping out in this time. And if you don't know where to start, what I would do is start with your local MLA. If you can't get a hold of your MLA, talk to the Premier as well. Because what's happening right now is during this 30-day grace period, government is looking for industry for inputs, and they probably want to hear from you. If you're in any specific industry and you don't feel like you're being heard at this moment, it's the best time is, I've been to some of the websites and we'll provide it for you as well. But what they want to do is hear back from government. Even Justin Trudeau's come out and said that, like, we want to hear from you, the Canadian people. And, whichever country you may be watching this from, like, reach out to your governor, reach out to any levels of government that are willing to listen, that are local to you. And if not, try to escalate it to the next level of government. But people do need to hear your voice. People do need to hear how you're affected by what is happening right now. And so one of the links that we want to give you is for the Trade Commissioner Service in Canada. And on this link here, this organization does organize trade missions to other countries and can help you get set up with other countries and inform you about events and trade shows that may be happening where your industry is directly involved. But now you can go with a group and try to get more information and leverage the networking opportunities that government provides. But there's lots of different levels of government that are willing to help. Sometimes not in your own province, and maybe in a different state or province that you may have to travel to in order to get the information. But you have to start looking, and that's the main thing is don't sit there and do nothing at this time. You want to pivot and you want to leverage resources that are available to you. I know sometimes as an entrepreneur or even as a manager, you don't really have many outlets to go to, but right now is a time where everyone needs to come together. There's probably people in your organization that can probably give ideas and pivot and help you leverage and again, you got to open yourself up to new ideas and a new way of doing things. The people that get stuck are the ones that typically disappear, but instead, open yourselves up and see what's around you. And we kind of gave you the idea about putting jobs out on LinkedIn, or connecting with people over LinkedIn or different networking platforms, and even the job boards to see who's available, who's able to help you in a situation like this. Even on our website, we do have a place where you can let us know what you're looking for. If you're a business, let us know what industry you're in and what you're looking to do and what you're open to doing, what your capacity is or capability is. And then maybe the viewers that are watching this that want to go into sales or help in business development can pair up with you and know where to find you and how to contact you, and we can pair you guys up together if it matches.
Yeah, and I know there's a few asks even to the government, but before even that, I think it's really important to not just get informed, but stay informed. And a lot of people have gone through and have heard about these potential, tariffs and what that means. But, far from that, it's not just what it means, but what does it actually mean? If it's a small exercise, maybe it's a good chance to take a look at your business and find out what goods do I have coming in right now that I have potential exposure to, and find out what that cost is to you. Because government's going to want to hear from individual business owners and companies about what they're potentially looking at. And when you have hard numbers that you could bring to your MLA or your premier or your prime minister or any of your government leaders to show, if these come into play, this is the cost to my business. And when you can attach a number to that, it makes that much more real than they're just talking about a 25% increase on these tariffs. And it's really having to do something. A lot of people, you say the ones that disappear, 9 times out of the 10 are the ones that don't do anything. And in this case, in order to get informed, you're gonna have to do the work and find out what is the dollar amount that I'm looking at, and what does that mean to my business? Is it sustainable? And what do I need to do to make sure? Because once you do that exercise and you know what you're looking at, you might not have a choice, but have to diversify and look at other manufacturers outside of your current network. So again, it's just really important to prepare now before the time comes, if and when these tariffs are put in place. But again, there's a few asks to the government, Gail. Did you want to cover a couple of those?
Now, it's the responsibility of both consumers and corporations to stand up and to tell the government what we need moving forward, especially if these 25% tariffs do come into play, because they are going to have large impacts, not just on our companies and the businesses that we work for and that we run and that we import and export from, but also on our day-to-day as consumers, as people with lives and families who eat groceries and buy products and buy clothes. These will impact us. So these are the asks that we tell you, that we are suggesting that you take to government for what we recommend moving forward with this trade situation that's going on. The first one is inclusive trade mission. By developing trade missions that leave no business behind, ensure these missions are inclusive and representative of all sectors affected by tariffs. By engaging a diverse array of industries, from small local enterprises to larger corporations, we can open new markets, foster international partnerships, and secure a stable trade environment. The second one is incentives for manufacturing and distribution. Create targeted incentives that encourage both local and global companies to build manufacturing and distribution networks throughout Canada. Such initiatives will not only boost job creation and innovation, but will also strengthen our national supply chain, making it more resilient to external pressures. The fourth one is enhanced connectivity platform. Establish a centralized platform that connects local businesses with foreign trade partners. This resource should offer seamless communication channels, share essential trade information, and provide support to help companies navigate tariff-related challenges. By streamlining interactions, this platform can be a cornerstone for building stronger, more collaborative trade relationships. And finally, targeted relief measures. Finally, we call for relief programs tailored to support businesses and individuals impacted by current tariffs, including those imposed by Trump and their retaliatory counterparts. Timely assistance and financial support can help mitigate economic hardships and ensure that affected stakeholders have the resources they need to adapt and thrive.
I do hope this serves as a reminder to government that they do play an important part, and it's a wake-up call for our government to also understand that what manufacturing means to our country and every country around the world. What does your supply chains look like currently? What can you do about it? How can you facilitate manufacturing to come back into your country and produce goods that is going to sustain you, or build partnerships that are more long-term and concrete, that won't be affected by tariffs in the future. But again, please let this serve as a wake-up call, and please, we do want our governments to take action. Take action because one is we want to be able to save our jobs, and secondly, we want to see our economies thrive.
Well said, Damon. Thanks. And again, as supply chain and logistics professionals, we just wanted to share some information to help individuals and businesses alike on both sides of the border and offer some solutions during this unprecedented time. So we hope you enjoyed today's talk and open discussion. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out and get in touch with us. Remember, our platform's just not geared for individuals or individual sales representatives, but for businesses and government as well. So feel free to utilize LogisticsSales.com as one more of your resources, and let's all come together. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone.